Now, let's not forget that Ephraim has an Egyptian descendancy. And if Ephraim, being the English, Templar Knight, Egyptian, English Freemasonry, and has founded America, we know that it's not a far stretch to imagine an Egyptian figurative symbolism that would accompany Ephraim's created architecture for this planned site of sacrifice known as New York City. In reality, the entire 13 colonies, but basically centered at that location. So, perfectly right here in front of you, it just does not get any more plain. Golgotha is being fulfilled as this great cemetery, monolithic, gated graveyard, the city of the skulls. And then, as we know, the monument, memento, shrine scenario falls perfectly in line right after what happened with the stone. And then they know that they're doing this to hope to create these gravestones, basically the death of masses of peoples, just like we saw in Revelation 11, the dead bodies shall lay in the street. And we come here, right here, to obelisk. Obelisk. And right in line with all of this, fulfilling exactly the requirements of Rev 11, the Egyptian connection. So the obelisk now is right in line with the pillars that represents the two towers, or in other words, these two columns. And here we have the way for them to achieve their house of wisdom is to unify right here these two columns. And just like you saw in New York, after they brought the two towers down, what did they do? They created a singular monument, a singular shrine. They unified, and they believe that what they're doing, being acted out, symbolized here within that architecture, awaiting this coming millstone, they believe that they're bringing this house of wisdom to the world. But in reality, the only thing they're doing is bringing these serpent wisdom bearers into our dominion, because it's the serpent that bears this wisdom, and that this is his deceptive technique and his trickery to deceive these supposed learned men and women of our world into performing this great work to bring him in. They have seduced mankind with this romantic knowledge of the supposed sacred feminine. So we can see right now, just very quickly, that these two towers are associated with a gate, which is in representation with this house of wisdom. In other words, to bring in this dominion of the wisdom of the serpent into our house. So it's going to fulfill exactly what we just saw with Revelation chapter 11, the 11 as the gate, and then it's describing this great monolithic lich gate that I told you is bringing those from the realms of the dead into the land of the living. Listen closely. The exalted point of Cancer symbolically represents the gateway of life from the etheric realms into the material world. And guess what? It's a Masonic Egyptian tradition. Perfectly. Just like the requirements that we see there in Revelation chapter 11. This gateway with these two towers is so very real, and the outworkings of this great work is being performed on the stage of the world right before our eyes. And now you can begin to see what the reality is that they're trying to do. Understanding this unification of these two towers, that's symbolically bringing those two towers down, bringing this division. And what has the division been? Well, it's been keeping these serpents away from the dominion of mankind, being represented over here by the daughters of men. The dominion of mankind being represented by the daughters of men is because this seduction of the sacred feminine through the daughters of men was how the serpent was going to achieve the dominion over the totality of mankind itself. So the women become the way for the serpent to establish his dominion. And then therefore we see that Jashin itself actually means he established, or he establishes. This Jashin further begins to fulfill itself along the lines of the sacred feminine by the term Yar Rib, of which is its root origin. And I said Yar Rib. Now remember, Eve, there's a secondary account of the creation of man, whether you understand this or not, in Genesis. We see that two Eves are created. One with the beginning of creation with mankind itself. Man and woman are created together. And then we see a secondary creation takes place later, where this woman is actually created from the rib of Adam. That's not our Father performing that. That's actually from the Sumerian text. And it's in reference to this god Enki, this great physician, performing what you know of in a sense as a medical procedure, this genetic procedure that's represented by this XX chromosome, the crossed ribs, the two X's of the chromosomes of women. So when we see this Yar Rib in Jashin, and it represents he establishes, it represents how these ancient sons of God, being urged by the wisdom of the serpent, established the Elite race to produce this descendancy that would do the great work to break the seal, to bring the serpent in. That's what they're trying to unify. So now in this column we see Boaz, which is the unification over here of the dominion of men, Jashin, and they're trying to establish this genetic descendancy, the Yar Rib, for the serpent to maintain its dominion. Now looking at it that way, you can see the very plainness of the cunningness of the sophistries of the serpent, and how these people have fallen to perform this work because he couldn't do it himself in the physical. He needed physical peoples that he could tempt to get this done. And that's the whole understanding of this temptation of mankind. This is what the temptation has been for. So do not let that go of your head, that Jashin means he establishes. It also means beauty, and this represents beauty and the beast. And now you begin to understand what that mythology or fairy tale has really been all about. And in that description, usually the beast is depicted as a lion, and then we know that that's a full fulfillment of these ancient lion whelps that's further fulfilled with the Dans, that further flips back to the Nods, which are the descendancy of the Nephilim, these descendants of the sons of God. And there's your gates. There's your two towers. There's the plan. There it is being manifested in New York City. There are the references to ancient Egypt, as we've already seen these connections. So it's all really right there. You know, once again, here's the obelisk, in connection with Golgotha, the great cemetery, pillar, column, all of it, all connected with cross, of which they are trying to double cross us. They're trying to put us on the cross, and at the same time they're trying to get rid of the cross itself, meaning what Christ did for us on the cross. All of it's completely 100% right there. Right there. Okay. Just absorb that. Take a look at it. It's a true Golgotha. All of this comes together to make very real understanding. Very real understanding that you're going to see people are going to reject. They're going to reject big time. All right. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom. And of course, we know New York, represented, is the most adverse spiritual place that you could think of, and Egypt. Simultaneously, these great buildings, simultaneously, these great institutions of education are there. And then also the representation of this great city of the dead where our Lord was crucified, Golgotha. Now, it just so happens that Golgotha is very close and similar to Gotham. And Gotham just so happens to be that fictional city of Batman that if you were to Google, that it is recognized and adopted that New York City is Gotham City. Now, if you were to simply just break the letters down in Gotham, you get Gotham. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to get ham. They're trying to destroy what they term as these Christian swine. And when they're saying Gotham, it's Gotham. And of course, Batman being representative of vampire, blood sacrifice, Night Stalker trying to become a Daywalker, the Dark Prince. And then if you viewed the latest Batman movie, which I still haven't, but it just seems like I already knew all about it before it ever came out. It's all about this destruction of Gotham City with a nuclear bomb off the coast of the city. So, incredible. It's all right there. And it's going to be all right here. Because here's going to be the Iraqi dinar, which is going to now have, guess what? That great arch. That great arch, which is connected here with the two polarities, which is now being completely symbolized right in front of your eyes with these ancient Sumerian, Babylonian, Assyrian gods. And I say that because throughout all of those cultures, their histories and their monuments are paying tribute to these ancient, mighty gods. Yet they're called by different names regionally. Their gods are represented by different epitaphs, but these epitaphs are describing the same gods. They're describing the same group of deities that were known as these ancient sons of God that began to be accepting worship unto themselves. So what you see now is the depiction of Utu Shemesh, which is further reflecting this connection with Marduk, who begins to further reflect his father Enki, Lord of the Flowing Waters. And this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about this being as the Nahesh, the serpent, the Boaz that is trying to unify. And then, of course, we see those that are doing the work. That's going to be the unicorns. And if we were to look very close down here on the dinar, there we can see our unicorns. Right there. Our little winged unicorns, if you will. Because they think they're going to take flight. So we have our depictions of our two unicorns. Right here, we're going to have the watermark of the pale horse. And we know that death and hell follow after. This is Dan, the pale horse. That's going to be these Nordics, the representation of the army of Joel 2. And that's why Jeremiah says, and the snorting was heard from the horses of Dan. Right there. So let's fulfill now Isaiah chapter 34. And remember keeping all in accord with what we see here in chapter 11 of Revelation, of what we talked about thus far. Now, Isaiah 34, you should read it for yourself in the fullness, but I'm going to simply read it as it comes out right here. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea, and upon the people of my curse to judgment. The sword of the Lord is filled with blood. It is made fat with the fatness, and with the blood of lambs and goats, and with the fat of kidneys of rams. For the Lord hath a sacrifice in Basra, and a great slaughter in the land of Idumea. And the unicorn shall come down with them, and the bullocks with the bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust made fat with fatness. Now remember, whose dust is being made fat with fatness? Because we have to remember that the serpent was declared to eat the dust all the days of thy life. And I've revealed that the dust is twofold. It represents the carbon atom of man, even man, Adam himself, that the serpent is seeking to devour, his dominion, his very lifeline. And then we see that this dust is in representation to this gold that was being produced in the temple of Hathor in the wilderness on Mount Serebet, aka Mount Sinai. So the dust that is being made fat with fatness is all in accord with this proclamation of the serpent, who is trying to make his meal of dust that much more heartier with these supposed sinners. And it's all right there. So when the unicorns shall come down with them, with who? With the bullocks and the bulls. Now, if you need any confirmation for these ancient Sumerian gods is being known as bulls, just simply Google it. And you can understand that Gilgamesh is referred to as a mighty wild bull, or a goring wild bull. So these are our bulls, and then this is why Ishtar, Hathor, Ashtoreth are all symbolized with the two horns, the sun disk, the bull, the cow. They're representative of the heifers, these daughters of men that they needed to establish to produce the golden calves. In other words, these ancient mighty ones. Now we look up above and we see right above, shadowing over this whole scene of Isaiah chapter 34, describing these unicorns with the bulls. In other words, this cock and bull story, we see right here the owl, the great owl, overshadowing the whole thing. Now, if we were to just speedily to close this video out, and I'm going to come back with another one, maybe not tonight, maybe so. If we just go and see after this sacrifice takes place, okay, it's associated with fire. The smoke, therefore, shall go up forever. And then we see these birds of heaven, just like these ancient Anunnaki gods are depicted. We see all of these different species of birds, and even dragons and owls begin to inhabit this land. That's what they're trying to do. What are they trying to do? They're trying to take our dominion. They're trying to inhabit the land. Notice here that it says it's going to be a court for owls. And then it says down here, once again, screech owl. And then one more time, it strongly represents the great owl. There shall the great owl make her nest, and lay and hatch and gather under her shadow. There shall the vultures also be gathered, every one with her mate. Now, the one thing that you have to know about that verse is that it's twofold. The first thing it does is it gives us the revelation of the owls over this Iraqi dinar, which is really, Iraq is really the location for ancient Babylon itself. The very core and root of these mystery religions that are all hailing from these ancient Anunnaki gods. So right here in this depiction, what do you see that they're all shadowed under? This owl symbolism going right across these great arches that have these 7 circles, which represent the 7 sisters, more importantly, the 7 stars of the Pleiades. Now you remember that we have to be consistent with the arch that we see here, and there's our 7 stars in the Pleiades, and then there's our representation for that great owl Ishtar in the 69. And that's the exaltation of this sacred feminine that you see right here, that we're going to begin to see correctly right here in front of our face, which is going to be, this is an, and you know this before, you've seen it, some of you, this is an actual piece of archaeological evidence. We have an ancient statue. It's also known as the Hebrew Ashtoreth. So right here in front of our face is a depiction of Ishtar with the great owls. And what is she trying to do? She's trying to submit the lions. And just like we know ultimately their plan is to destroy those lions that are believing in Jesus Christ. And it all comes together right here in front of your face. And there's no way for anyone to deny it. There shall the great owl make her nest and lay and hatch and gather under her shadow, just like we see on the dinar. Now the second fold part is coming. There's everybody under a shadow. Here's the second fold part. Now if you know, and there's no denying this, Google this. Watch the agents try to refute it. Northern Israel, led by Ephraim, the 10 tribes, which is really the representation of the 10 horns of the dragon. Remember the dragon Revelation? The great red dragon has 10 horns in one figurative depiction. These 10 horns are representations of the 10 tribes, Northern Israel, fallen Israel. So the unicorn is the symbol for Northern Israel. So that is why Ephraim becomes the unicorn, the leader of Northern Israel. So if Ephraim is the unicorn, you now understand who these vultures are that are gathered under the owl, just like you see this gathering under the owl here, because the vultures are eagles. Vultures in Hebrew is interchangeable with eagle. And you want to know why? And when you think eagle, think good old US of A. Think Ephraim. That's right. And then further think what's hidden under that eagle symbolism with the phoenix. And they believe they're going to rise from the ashes and be made anew. So this eagle now connects why to vultures? Because of ancient Egypt. Remember, the vultures are revered and depicted in ancient Egypt, the symbolism of the regeneration from death to life. And exactly why we see the unicorn as Northern Israel, which is Ephraim, and then now we see gathered under the shadow is the vultures, which is interchangeable in Hebrew with eagle, which represents good old Ephraim. How convenient. That's a lot of stuff to say. That's a whole lot of stuff to put together right here. So there's a lot more to say. So as you can see, this land of Adume, or really not the land of Adume, but it's the people that are figuratively symbolized with Judea and Edom. Okay, there they are. There's the symbol. Remember, they say they want to behead them in Revelation. There's the symbol of the beheading. Okay, this conquering lion. And then this Basra, as I told you, the real spiritual root, this land that they're going to give up, just like you see in Revelation chapter 17, verse 17, it says that God has put it in their hearts for them to give their kingdom unto the beast. Well, the beast, Enki, is having the kingdom given to them and prepared by these kings of the earth, these 10 tribes, these United Nations. And these United Nations are representative of the torn olive branch of the book of Romans. And that's why you're going to see on our money nothing but little olive branches tucked in all around English Ephraim George Washington's little neck on the $1 bill. And I had one, I just don't see it out right now, but you've all seen it. You all know that the eagle is carrying the torn olive branch. The torn olive branch represents unbelief. That unbelief is in Jesus Christ. That's why these learned Jews rejected Jesus, and that's why you see this supposed house of wisdom now is supposed to be associated with this serpent wisdom, which is this plan to bring in these supposed light bringers into our world, all with the deception and the plan of the sacred feminine, using everybody to achieve their goal. Exactly right. So there's a whole lot more to say, but man, I tell you, if that doesn't get through to some of you guys, I just don't know what to tell you. I just don't know what to tell you. Let me remind you all that who don't know that I do call myself a seer, and I don't have any shame in that. All right, I'm a seer. It's plain and simple. I somehow have been entrusted with a great sight, and I am absolutely humbled by it. I am absolutely thankful every day of my life, but at the same time, I'm supremely confident in my faith of Jesus Christ. That is the chief reason why I've been given such a trust, because I'm not going to fail at my trust. I'm going to deliver consistently and successfully, the best of my ability, this message of the absolute perfection of Jesus with his mercy, and then reveal this coming destruction as the best of my ability, as it's already been given to me in this drawing, this record of my vision from over 20 years ago. So for those of you who don't know, there's a video series I did when I didn't know much about this drawing. I just newly discovered it again before I was about to throw it away, and I began to look at it and realize that this was a perfect reflection for the 9/11 event. There's the plane up there, and then we have this ass in, and everyone knows that I had no idea about this connection with ass as the donkeys, the genetic mixture of the nods being the onagers, which is the representation of the wild asses of Job chapter 24, that have to have the wasting of the destruction of the city. In other words, the city has to be prepared as a wilderness before these asses can come in. And then here on the plane, it says ass in. It says Nisa. And if you look up Nisa, you're going to find out Nisa represents goal. It represents beginning. It represents feminine. It represents everything that we're talking about. I am a seer, and it's proven. There's this being with a crooked step reaching for these two towers, once again, that we see depicted as this like illusion scene of these mushrooms, which now fulfill themselves with LSD, the hallucination, Lucifer, Satan, and the devil. Now we see the hooked nose, which further fulfilled with Sandy Hook, which I found out later fulfills with the Assyrians and their hooked nose. And then we see that Ephraim is turned to the Assyrian. All throughout the Bible, you will see that Ephraim reveres these ancient Assyrian mighty ones. We see on the cape the S for Satan, the S for the serpent, the S for the crooked serpent, and there, I never knew why, but there's that crooked step, and he's supposed to be this superhero, he's supposed to be this coming new man, and then we know that Batman is supposed